Welcome to the Chiro Business Mojo Podcast, where we deconstruct the methods, marketing, and mindset of successful business people and chiropractors from around the world. And now your host, Dr. Richard Day.
All right. Yes, I am Dr. Richard Day, and this is the Chiro Business Mojo Podcast. Hello, and once again, I am so pleased to be with you. I hope you are having a fabulous day, and I'm looking forward to being a small part of that. Well, today on the show, we have got Dr. Jen Faber, and she is the founder of the Freedom Formula. She coaches health and wellness providers on how to build a practice that gives them freedom with the lifestyle that they want. She personally has transformed from being a burned-out associate to building a successful six-figure practice, all by working less than full-time. Pretty amazing. So with that, let's say hello to Dr. Jen Faber.
Hey there, Dr. Rich. Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to being here today.
Well, thank you for taking the time to join us. I really appreciate that. And do me a favor and jump in and feel free to fill in any of the gaps I may have missed in your bio.
Yeah, well, I think you really covered a lot of the bases on like my overall story and the transformation, which I'm excited to get more into in the interview. I think something that's really important to point out is that the burnout that I experienced early on in my career was so bad, I actually thought about leaving the profession. And I share that because on the flip side now, when I look back, obviously I'm so glad that I didn't, but I'm excited to share if there's listeners out there who are feeling really stuck or burned out and looking for something different, I'm here to share with you, hey, there are other ways to look at this. There are other ways to build your practice. So if you are feeling that way, let's dive in and figure out a different path for you. So I wanted to just share that for perspective before we dive in.
Well, take me back to the beginning for you. Why did you become a chiropractor?
You know, I always wanted to be in the health profession. I love biology, anatomy, all those different things. And going through my own injuries as an athlete and going through the therapy and the rehab and how that transformed my own life, I was looking for a way to give back and provide the same type of care. And I initially was looking into careers like physical therapy, becoming an orthopedic surgeon even. And then when I was in college, I started to realize that more of that was focused on primarily sick care and just getting people out of pain, or I would see people who were continually in pain and not getting better. And I was looking for something that would allow me to tap more into the health that we have, tap more into waking up the health and wellness that our bodies are designed to do. And in college, I was actually talking the chiropractic philosophy, and I didn't even know it existed at the time. And then my good friend said, hey, why don't you go talk to my chiropractor? See what he's doing. And when I did, it completely changed my life. I saw what he was talking about with his patients on turning the power back on and helping patients actually be advocates in their own health and transforming their lives. And I realized this is it. This is what I want to do. I want to focus more on healthcare and not on sick care. And that was a big tipping point for me to actually find a profession that actually spoke to the philosophy that I already believed. And it's funny too, right? Don't they always say like, you don't find chiropractic finds you. And that's what happened for me. So that's what opened up the doors for me to go on this journey.
Yeah, I hear that a lot on this show. I didn't choose chiropractic. Chiropractic chose me. So it sounds like it's very similar to what you're talking about there. Well, let's go forward a little bit in time. So you're graduating, you're having that moment where you walk across the stage, your family is there, your friends are there, and it's such an exciting time. And then you head on that journey towards becoming a practitioner. Briefly, give us a real quick overview of that journey for you.
Yeah, the journey for me at that point, I had just come off an amazing last year in school. You know, I did the clinic abroad program. I went to Palmer, so I'd had a chance to travel abroad and provide care in a lot of different settings. And it really felt like an awesome blank canvas for me. I knew when I graduated, I didn't want to start my own practice right away, though I knew that was the eventual goal. But for me, I was excited because I thought, what could that look like if I could find a mentor, one of the giants, you know, one of the greats in our profession who has a successful practice, and have him or her take me under his wing. So at that time, I knew I wanted to learn from someone. And I was excited to see what the opportunities were out there. And I wasn't really attached to location either. I'm kind of a free spirit. So I was literally looking all over the country, figuring out what could be the best fit for me, what could be a great practice that I could fall into. And that's where I'd started. That was the mindset I brought to the table after I graduated.
Well, let's shift forward in time today. Let's talk about what you're working on today. I know that you're helping folks out, and I'm excited to hear about the type of things that you are teaching people.
Yeah, and let me first backpedal to what happened early on in my career when I was at that point, so it'll give better perspective on what I'm doing today. Is I found an associateship and I started working for a very traditional style practice. So I was working with a doctor and several associates in a high volume practice. I think we were seeing 2,000 patient visits a month, and it was a really strange feeling because within the first couple of months, I became very dissatisfied with being a chiropractor. And I was really confused because I loved the work. I loved being with my patients, but I didn't love the pace. And I didn't actually enjoy seeing patients every couple of minutes. I wanted to spend more time with my patients. And I didn't know that at the time until I was actually in the thick of that experience. And I will say the environment was also quite toxic. The boss was incredibly micromanaging and incredibly negative and cynical and criticizing, and not just from a constructive place. So when coupling that with being in this really high volume model that I thought was the norm of how we're supposed to practice, I started to feel very much like the chiropractic unicorn. I felt completely out of place, and I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. So I'll fast forward to today, but that was a huge tipping point for me to realize I need to actually create a different way to practice for myself because I don't fit in this model. So fast forward to today, everything that I am about is about teaching chiropractors and other health professionals how to build a practice around their lifestyle, how to actually have a balance between both. Because I believe, and I've witnessed and have heard now from several others in our industry, that we are typically taught to put the focus on our practice. And a lot of times people say, oh, it's going to take you a couple of years to build a successful practice. But the challenge is that what gets put on hold is us, the individual. When we take the chiropractor hat off and we go home to be with ourselves, with our loved ones, enjoying our life, that gets put on hold. And we spend all of our time investing in our practice, investing money, time, effort, marketing. And I believe that's a huge reason why burnout is so prevalent in our profession, because we're being taught to focus on our practice and doing the thing we love, but we're not being taught on how to create that balance, how to actually create both. And I believe that's possible. I've actually created that for myself and now teach others on how to do that. But that's really what I'm passionate about today. I believe that if doctors can create a way that they can actually have a balance where they're living their life, they're investing in their practice, but not getting burned out by it and waking up in a few months or years not enjoying it anymore, that is what's going to create more longevity in our peers, more longevity in our industry, more chiropractors who are sticking around and continually satisfied with their work and not getting worn down physically or emotionally, but actually having the best of both.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said that I think it really needs to be understood, and that is that when you say a practice that fits your lifestyle. You know, I think that this is a new term for me recently, but in the last couple of years, I've become familiar with the term lifestyle business. And I thought, what the heck is that? Well, some people, you know, they're in business to make enough money to have the lifestyle they want. And if they're comfortable within that, they're happy. And other people have to have, you know, a lot more than that, but either one of those is success. And wherever your comfort zone is, if it's to make sure you have enough money, I interviewed a guy who closes about every 2 months and takes a 3-week vacation. That's what his lifestyle, what he wants for his lifestyle. And so he builds his practice around that. But yeah, if you're not happy in your situation or you're not happy with the stresses involved and what you happen to be doing, I mean, certainly rethink it and come up with a strategy to build it around your lifestyle. I love that.
Yeah, and I want to dive into that just a layer deeper too, because I think this is really important. So in my own journey, a lot of who I've studied are the online entrepreneurs who are building those lifestyle businesses, because I love bringing that knowledge into our specific profession. But something you said that I think is really invaluable is I think there's two ends of the spectrum that are in our profession and the conversation's not happening. The more common and expected path is you build a high volume practice that's very successful, very lucrative. You're seeing a lot of patients and helping a lot of people. On the flip side, there are also the chiropractors who actually don't want that. They actually want to spend more time with their patients or maybe have a slower pace or just want to have a simple small office and not the big infrastructure. But to your point, both are right. It's all a matter of figuring out what's actually the best path for me. And how do I want to be the architect of that? Because for some, it could be building the 7-figure practice and seeing thousands of people. And I'm here to say that's okay too. But on the flip side, if you're looking for something different and you want to have a slower pace, that's also okay. It's actually figuring out first that awareness of how do I define that? How do I define what is the type of practice I want to build, as opposed to just building a practice the way that we think we should or need to, or what's right, or the way that's going to be successful. And I think that's where the rubber hits the road, is actually creating that definition for you so you can build the practice that you actually love because you've created it.
Well, do you notice in your experience that there are commonalities in those folks who are not, where they want to be in practice?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I see is typically the chiropractors that come to me are typically those that aren't on the more typical path. They're actually looking for something different. They are looking for a different way to practice where they are spending more time with patients. They want to have lower overhead. They want to have more time where they can also be with their family and they're not spending hours on their paperwork or spending 12 hours in their practice seeing patients. And then they feel a little guilty because they're like, but I love being a chiropractor. I love what I do. And it almost feels like they have to disclaim it to still justify, hey, just because I don't have this as my goal. I love what I do. I just want it in a different way. And that vulnerability is so huge. And one of the biggest commonalities I see is the uncertainty of where they actually want to go because they feel like they have to follow a typical path. I'm here to tell you that you don't. Actually listen to what that intuition is telling you. So the commonality is typically feeling a little out of place, and they love what they do. They just want to do it in a different way, but then they feel stuck. They have no idea how to actually do it or make it happen or if it's even possible. So the hamster wheel keeps going and they kind of stay where they are, not figuring out how can they break free and how can they actually create something that's authentic to them, which that's where I love to fit in. It's just like, hey, let's actually figure out that path for you. Let's actually figure out what that lifestyle practice means for you. And then let's build the strategies that are custom to that and custom to your goals.
Well, kind of take me through that, because one of the things I like that you teach is how to build a practice that you love. And, if you don't love your practice, if you're not in love with it, then that passion's gone. And there's that word we hear a lot is you need that passion, that fire to go. So certainly we want to be in love with what it is we are doing every day. So if I came to you and I said, hey, I am just kind of, bored and I kind of dread on Sundays that I know I have to go in on Monday, where would you start with me on building this practice?
Sure. So great question. So the first thing I would say is that my philosophy now is as more of a teacher and a mentor is teaching frameworks. So teaching structures that chiropractors can apply specifically to their goals. And in that there's a system, but it's not me saying, hey, if this is what you want, Rich, this is the way you have to do it. You have to follow this exact system. I teach frameworks and structures so we can figure out how does that apply to your specific goals. So if you and I were sitting down across the table or on the phone, the first thing I would ask you is let's identify what's not working for you. Let's actually figure out what are the things that you're not satisfied with. Let's get aware of that first. Because a lot of times doctors will say, well, this is like they get frustrated. This is what's not working. This is what I would love to have, but not actually isolating it and mapping it out. So I would actually look at what's not working for you. Let's bullet point it out and just brainstorm on all of those different things. Then let's look at the opposite. What is the opposite of that? If you don't want to see patients every 3 minutes and you want to spend 15 minutes with them, let's start there. If you want to cut your overhead by 30%, let's actually look at how we can do that. So it's looking at your current practice situation, but then looking at this idea of a future focus. What is that future version of yourself that you want to aim towards? What's that future version of your practice that you want to create? And then using frameworks to fill out the gap. And the first framework I always start with is actually your bigger vision, not just your practice vision, but your vision for everything. Why are you doing what you're doing, not just as a chiropractor for your patients, but what does that mean for you? What does that mean for your family? And a lot of times when I start there, docs will say things like, I'm missing out because I'm still in my practice when my kids are at a game or a swim meet or a band concert, or I'm not even making enough money to take time off. So I like to find those rubs. I like to find those challenges and then create an entire map on how can we actually design your lifestyle and where does your practice fit into that? And then build everything from there. Your marketing, your systems, your approach, your volume, your appointment flow, all of those things. But everything I do starts from awareness. And then it starts from looking at that future focus of what you want to create and then establishing your vision. So every decision that you're making in your practice is actually in alignment with that.
Such a key concept. I think far too many of us, not just chiropractors, but people in general, suffer from this, and that is we go in and day out and we do the work, but we don't have a long-term plan. And certainly to set that plan first and then work backwards from there is going to make, like you said, everything you do fall into alignment. And I think there's a deeper level of fulfillment knowing that, okay, now this effort that I'm putting in, that grind day in and day out, it's a step along the path to this bigger goal. Absolutely. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that, Anthony Robbins, right? One of the greats. He's someone I love to listen to a lot. And he talks about the idea of when you are working on things, your to-do list, what are you doing to accomplish your goals? A lot of times we get lost in just the busy work. Like I have to do all of this stuff, but we forget the why. We forget, why am I doing this? Why am I putting so much work into this? And that's one of the biggest things that I love to talk about is that idea of also intention. Why are you doing what you're doing? Let's actually make sure that the work that you're putting into your practice, it's purposeful and intentional. And one of the themes I typically see in docs who are burned out is they tend to be reacting to their practice as opposed to actually creating it. And what I mean by that is letting the practice kind of create them and happen without them deciding, well, these are the types of patients I want to see, or these are the types of hours I want to work. But it goes back to the idea of, well, this is what I should do. This is probably what I have to do. I'm just going to work hard and put in super long days and do all this stuff and hope it works. So they're reacting to the results that actually aren't the results that they want. The difference is actually when you have that intention of what's the overall goal, what is that bigger picture, which is why that idea of having a lifestyle practice is so important, is so you don't lose yourself along the way. It's also important to remember what you want in life outside of the chiropractor hat and making sure that your decisions in practice match that vision and remembering that vision every single day and in every single action that you take. It's so critical. And when you do that, it's completely transformative.
Well, I talk to quite a number of new docs who are getting ready to enter practice for the first time, and they'll ask me, look over this lease and what do you think of this budget that I've set up? And a lot of times I think they're getting in way over their heads. And you've got some advice on how people can create a practice without spending thousands. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would say is my approach would be, what's the most minimalist way that you could launch your own practice? If that's your goal coming right out of the gate, I want to start my own practice. What's the cleanest, simplest, most cost-effective way that you can do it? And getting actually creative with those solutions. Because I think sometimes as a new grad, it's challenging for two reasons. One, it's kind of sensory overload with the opportunities. We see all of these different things or all of these different techniques or all of these bells and whistles we can add to our practice. And we forget that you can also run a practice with your table and your hands. And that's why people are coming to you at the simplest, purest form of what chiropractic is. And when I decided to break away from that high volume and I built a practice around house calls, I realized that, wow, if I have my table in my hands, I could go anywhere and do this. So as a new grad, the first thing I would do before looking into any opportunities is go back to that bigger vision. Go back to like the why. Why did you become a chiropractor in the first place? I actually think that can get lost a little bit along the way, even in school. So as a new grad, we've just come from all of this training and all of this clinical work. And the next step is just thinking, okay, now it's my time to build the practice, but we lose that intention. So keeping that as a recurring theme, it's figuring out, what does that look like for me in its most simplest terms? And then anytime an expense or an investment comes into play, ask yourself, do I really need that? Or can I do something on a lower scale? So if you want the high-low table that has all the bells and whistles, ask yourself, do you really need that? Could you start with something simpler and grow into that? And I think that's important to distinguish, because it's also not just staying minimalist either, but it's smart that the lower that you can keep your overhead and startup costs at the beginning, the faster you can grow and build a profitable practice in a matter of months, not years. But docs get way over in their head, typically spending way too much on overhead. Now, on the flip side of that, if you want to have the bigger practice and the bigger space at some point in multiple treatment rooms at some point, then create an action plan on how to actually get there. Don't start with that and take thousands of dollars in startup costs. Start with the small office. Start with the basic equipment. People will come to you because of you, not because of the space or how fancy it is. They're going to come to you because of you and your value. But if your vision is bigger in terms of space, infrastructure, environment, size, then figure out, okay, what volume do I need to see to get there, to be able to invest in that? So you could actually start your practice in as little in the red as possible and make profit that much faster.
Yeah, I think that is just key advice. You know, Apple was started by two guys in a garage, and they weren't out shopping for the nicest, biggest office space because they were looking at what Apple was going to be like in 10 years. They started in a garage. Humble beginnings is the place to keep it because unfortunately, a lot of us never make it out of that gate. You know, they set their sights too high, and I've seen it with folks that graduated around the time that I did, where within a year they were already out of business. In fact, I would say they were out of business before their doors ever opened. They just didn't know it.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was at that crossroads, the first 2 years were just a ton of burnout. And at that crossroads, when I decided, I'm going to leave this job and figure something out, my initial reaction was, well, let me just see what I need to do to build a typical practice. And when I started to look at the numbers, I realized, my gosh, like in the area I was in, which was Washington, D.C. at the time, rent alone could be several thousand a month. And then I'd have to see several hundred patients just to make ends meet. And I realized that's actually not what I wanted. I didn't want to get caught up in a financial black hole, which I think is one of the biggest reasons why docs get burned out. And then you pile that onto student loans and they're like, I'm a doctor and I'm not even making great money. And again, sometimes docs will think, well, I want to help as many people. I don't want to make it about the money, but that's also part of it, right? We deserve to make a good livelihood. We deserve to be able to contribute back to our loved ones and our household and our lifestyle. So that's one of the biggest things I would say is the more streamlined and the more minimalist you can start out of the gate, the benefit is you will become profitable faster. And when you're profitable faster, you're instantly going to have more freedom because you can then leverage the money you're making however you want. You can put it back into your practice or you can invest it in your life and your family and your community. But it gives you that freedom to choose as opposed to starting off so in the red that you're already freaking out and already build a practice where you're feeling the stress and pressure. When you can build a practice with more freedom out of the gate, you're instantly going to be happier and instantly going to be more satisfied because you're making smarter decisions, but you're eliminating the common stresses and pressures that most docs feel like they have to face.
Well, I want to shift gears and talk about something near and dear to my heart, and that is automation. There's so much that we do in practice that is, repetitive over and over, and especially in the world of marketing and just managing our practices. So one of the things you talk about are ways that we can automate our practices. What do you recommend?
Well, there's a lot of important things that I think can be automated that typically aren't. And one of the biggest ones is going back to two of the biggest ones really are scheduling and paperwork. And I still encounter a lot of docs who are doing a lot of running their practice in a way that's very much paper-based. So paper charts, or they're scheduling at the time of the appointment, or they're doing a lot of things at the time of the appointment. So the first thing I would recommend before actually getting in the weeds of like, well, what's the right system for me and what's the specific tool I should use? The first thing I would actually look at and evaluate are your energy and time leaks. What are the things in your practice that are taking a ton of time? Because it could also be different for every doctor. Some doctors for every appointment will schedule a patient at the time of that appointment, and that takes a little bit of time. That's a moment to ask yourself, well, how can I automate that? Can I automate that? What can I do to make sure I'm not spending time on that at every single appointment? And it's not just you, it's also your staff. If you have a front desk person or a team of people, what are those things that are actually wasting time? What are the things that are happening every single day that don't necessarily need to be in person, that you can actually systemize? And thinking about the things that are the most frustrating, what takes the most amount of time? So that's what I would first actually do is assess where are those energy leaks coming from? Are you spending too much time trying to schedule or reschedule a patient? If you are, then looking at an online scheduling system is going to be huge for you. If you're taking payment as a cash practice and every appointment you're taking payment, well, what can you do to actually automate it so the payment's already on file and the payment just happens when the patient leaves the appointment or comes in the door? Paperwork, if you're using the paper charts, looking around at, there's so many different EHR systems out there that you can use to actually make everything more electronic. Patient intake forms, like there's so many things. Patient intake forms, if you're sending them or having people fill them out or they're having to print them out, what can you do to automate them so they can fill them out electronically? But it first has to start with, again, so it's not just get all these bunch of tools and download all this stuff to automate your practice. Look at where you're spending your time and where you don't want to be spending your time. And start there. And then you can assess, okay, what are the systems that I need to help me automate my practice further? And I'm going to go a step further into a common objection I hear when docs talk about automation or hear this concept. They'll say, Dr. Jen, I love the idea of automation, but I don't want to make my practice get less personal. Am I going to miss out on being able to have conversations with patients, or my front desk person being able to communicate with patients? And I'm here to tell you it's actually quite the opposite, because the more you can automate any of the busy work that's happening in your practice or that your front desk person is having to deal with, guess what? The more time you're actually freeing up to be present with your patient, or for your staff to be more present with them when they're in the waiting area. So you're actually going to create a better experience for you as a provider because you're more systemized, but you're also going to create a better experience for your patients because it's easy. And patients actually want convenience. They want the simplest path as possible. So the more of the things that you can automate and the less they think about, everyone wins. So that's more of a philosophical standpoint on it, but I bring that up because that's also the mindset to bring to the table to make automation effective and make sure you're choosing the systems that are the best for you.
Yeah, I love that. Just like what you said when you were talking, if there's an objection out there, anyone who's listening to automating this process, it absolutely does free up more time for you to have a conversation with a patient rather than have them sitting in your lobby filling out paperwork. I can attest to that myself. I want to shift and talk about marketing. So when it comes to marketing a practice, what are some of your best hacks?
Sure. This, by the way, Rich, is like one of my favorite things to talk about. I love talking about marketing because if you can figure out how to market, it's actually fun. And people listening might think I'm totally crazy when I say that, but let's first call out the problem. Most people in our industry will say, I hate marketing. I feel like the used car salesman. I feel super pushy and salesy and I don't enjoy it. But we also know we have to market to get patients. So here's my biggest hack that is so important. What typically happens is when chiropractors are marketing, when they leave their doors of their office, they take off their chiropractor hat and they put on their marketing hat. And they're thinking that they all of a sudden have to become this great marketer and then start talking about what they do and talk about their practice and talk about how great they are and what all their services are. So the biggest mistake that I see chiropractors make is they think that the way to market is to talk about the philosophy of chiropractic and the services that they provide and what they can do for patients. Now, disclaimer, the philosophy of what we do is amazing and the services that we offer is amazing. So I just wanted to say that to get that out of the way because I'm going to say something that's going to seem really counterintuitive. The best way to market is to stop talking about what you do. The best way to market is to put all of the focus on the people that you want to serve in your community. And here's what I mean by that. Picture a spinal screening, right? Typically what happens? Someone comes up and you instantly start talking about what are you doing? What are you offering? This is a special that we're promoting today. All of the focus is on you. Rarely have you put any attention actually on the patient or the potential patient. If you flip it, and by the way, when you do that approach, you're actually going to feel like the used car salesman that you don't want to feel like because you're actually being pushy. And you don't mean to be. We don't mean to be pushy. We don't want to show up that way. But it's like when you're in a conversation and the person is just talking about themselves and how, like, what they're doing, there's no conversation for them in a marketing event or a networking event. The best thing that we do as doctors, in addition to the actual art of chiropractic, is we listen. We actually put the focus on them. So when we're sitting down at an initial appointment or follow-up appointments or an ROF, what are we doing? We're listening. We're asking questions. We're trying to understand them and how they're doing and what are they dealing with? That mentality and that approach, if you take how you show up as a doctor, which by the way is authentic because it's you, right? We're most comfortable as doctors. That's why we came into this profession in the first place. And when you go out and market, whether you are at a networking event, a health fair, a screening, a public talk, put all of the focus on them as much as possible at the beginning. Ask them the questions. Get to know them. What are their challenges, their problems? What are they dealing with? And then talk about what you provide. But you don't talk about what you provide just by listing services. Talk about how you can be the solution to what they're dealing with. Talk about the benefits of your care. So rather than talk about your latest decompression machine, talk about how you actually help improve the mobility in the spine so there's less inflammation and they can deal with less low back pain if low back pain is something they're dealing with. So we get caught up in talking about what we do. And I'm telling you, if you flip that switch and you actually talk about the patient first, you actually put all of the focus on asking them the questions first, just like you would do in an initial appointment, you're instantly going to feel more at ease, less pressure, a heck of a lot more real, and you're actually going to get better results. Because patients, the potential patients will say, oh, this person's listening. They're genuinely interested. They're not just pitching me. And then they think, oh, I think this person could help me. That's the switch. And it's like a cosmic shift. When you do that, not only is your marketing effective, you can market less because your efforts are more effective, which means you're freeing up free time and it's more enjoyable for you. So that if you apply just that one thing, that will completely transform how fast you can grow your practice and how you actually feel about marketing as a whole.
Yeah, that is it's a real paradigm shift. And I think most of us struggle with that simply because we're human beings. And as such, we're kind of wired to be all about ourselves. I mean, just unfortunately.
Right.
I can tell you that I really had to train myself to think that way, and I started in interpersonal conversations. I remember one time I went to a family function, well, it was family and friends mixed, and I made it a goal to talk about myself as little as possible. And whenever I was in a conversation with someone, I almost took an outsider view and said, okay, make sure you ask them questions about themselves, and they are the subject. And I found that the more I did that, the more conversations I had, the more people told me, oh, I'm so glad to see you. I hadn't seen you in a while. And I really left after several hours and really didn't talk about myself at all. And it's just counterintuitive to how we all think. But if you can discipline yourself to do it and have community conversations in that style. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's hard too, right? Because we are so passionate about our philosophy, and our philosophy it's vital. It's our lifeblood. Like, it's why we became chiropractors. But I'm here to tell you, and this is gonna sound a little, this may strike a little nerve. The people that you're talking with don't necessarily care about the subluxation or the nerve interference or turning the power back on. Not in that context. They care about how can you help them? How can you transform them? Because if someone's dealing with chronic headaches, chronic pain, chronic inflammation, you have to think about how is that affecting their lives? So I love what you said in that, Rich, too, of like, step outside of yourself as a chiropractor and think about them. What is it like if they're dealing with headaches every day and they can't fall asleep at night, or they can't be present with their kids because they're in so much pain? What does it feel like if you're in your third trimester and you have low back pain all the time? Like, what does that feel like for that person? Step into their world and take the empathy that we naturally have as chiropractors and use that to have conversations. And one of the biggest things I always say is marketing is not about marketing. Marketing is about building relationships. Marketing is about connecting with people. And the way you connect with them is you put the focus on them, and you will have your opportunity. You will have your window to talk about subluxations, talk about nerve interference, talk about how you turn the power back on. But you got to get them into your world first. Actually, you have to get into their world first so you can welcome them into yours. And that will be a huge shift, huge shift.
Yeah, I have to admit, when I go to the dry cleaners and I am dropping off a shirt and I want them to get the stain out, their philosophy and process of removing the stain is nothing on my mind.
Right. What are we after, right? The clean shirt, right? What's the end result that someone is after? Like the patients that, I would typically I love working with athletes, triathletes, marathon runners, high performing athletes. Their end result is they want to perform better. They want to break their personal best. They want to qualify for a larger race. So that's a big thing too, is what's the end result that your patients are after? And then communicate in a way that's relevant to them. So we're not just talking generally about what we do, but we talk about how can we help them specifically, right? How could an orthotic help a runner specifically? You know what I mean? So that's really the key, is think about the end result that the person is after, and then how do you fit into it? Not the other way around.
Well, you have provided a ton of content so far today, and actionable content, and that's what this show is all about. Let's boil it down. Do you have any one thing you would tell the new doc out there to start doing tomorrow? And then the same advice for the doc who's been in practice a while and they're maybe stuck.
Yeah. And it's actually the same advice I would give regardless of which of those two situations that you're in. If you are either fresh out of the gate or you're in a practice situation that's not working for you, the first thing I would ask yourself is, what do I want to create? What do I want to create? What is my end result? What do I want to create in my practice? And what do I want to create in my life? Think about that first, and think about it on the bigger picture. Don't just get lost in what your practice is about. What is that looking like? Get lost in the bigger vision. Get lost in the bigger contribution back to your household, to your family, to yourself. What's that overall balance that you want to achieve? And then figure out how can you go from there. But everything that you are building in your practice, every decision that you're making, whether it's a job opportunity or an office space that you're looking to rent, you have to understand your vision with so much clarity first that you know where you're heading. So you're making decisions that are in alignment with that. And if you do that, you'll actually be happier out of the gate, but you're also going to reach your level of success that you want to out of the gate because you have that level of awareness on what you want. And you're going to wake up realizing, oh my God, I'm actually having a practice, but I can also have that life at the same time.
Well, we are fast approaching the saddest part of the interview, and that's when it has to end. But before we get there, I've got a few things I want to talk about. When it comes to success and your own personal success, who are your personal heroes?
My biggest one, well, I have two. My biggest one is Richard Branson, because he, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, is kind of a baller. He completely is unconventional. He knows exactly what he's about. He doesn't care what convention is telling him to do. And he is so authentic and comfortable in his own skin that I love it. And he's also an incredibly balanced man. He's got this incredibly successful business empire, but he's an adventurer. He's a free spirit. He has an amazing lifestyle that he has chosen to build, and he's done it in a way where he's made some decisions that a lot of people in his world will say are going to fail or counterintuitive, and he's created something amazing because he has stayed true to himself along the whole way. So he's been a huge inspiration for me because I feel pretty unconventional in my own path and how I got to where I am now, that I really emanate a lot of what he has done and try to hold true to that philosophy. And how can I tap into my own free spirit every day in the work that I'm doing?
Well, are there any habits, rituals, or routines you do every day that help you become successful?
The biggest one is actually something I've just started in the past 60 days, and I do a miracle morning. And it's actually a phenomenal book. If you haven't heard of it, I would absolutely check it out. And the miracle morning is a 6-part routine where you wake up earlier in the morning and you do 6 aspects that all focus on personal growth to start off your day. So you're not rolling out of bed just thinking about all the stuff you have to do and then getting started. So typically I'll take an hour from 5 to 6 a.m. and I will do 6 things. I'll do 10 minutes of silence, 10 minutes of affirmations, 10 minutes of visualization, 10 minutes of exercise, 10 minutes of reading, something that inspires me, and then 10 minutes of journaling to reflect on my day, reflect on what I'm doing, reflect on my vision. And if I don't wake up right away, and I'll just shorten it. I'll spend maybe 3 minutes on each of those things. But when I do that every morning, and on the mornings that I don't do that, if I sleep in, I feel completely different. I do not feel as on. But the Miracle Morning has completely changed my mindset and my productivity. It's a phenomenal book, and it's something that has become a really phenomenal habit in my own life as of late that just helps me feel really on and excited to an even higher level of the work that I do. It's been huge.
Yeah, that book has been very impactful on a lot of folks. We're hoping to have the author, Hal Elrod, on the show.
Oh, fantastic.
He's dealing with some health issues right now, but we're hoping to have him after the first of the year. But we'll definitely link to that book in our show notes today. Dr. Jen Faber, it has been so fantastic having you here. How can our audience connect with you and find out more about what you do?
Oh, well, first, thank you so much. It's been just an awesome pleasure to share my own journey and insights, hoping it helps the listeners in your audience who are looking for something different in practice. The easiest way you can learn more about me and get access to a lot of different free trainings about how to build a lifestyle practice is go directly to my website. So that's www.drjenfaber.com. And I will hook you up there with anything you need, blog posts, free trainings, and would love to share with you everything I've learned along the way.
Well, you shared a ton of valuable information with us here today, and I feel like there's probably more we could talk about. So will you come back and join us at a later date?
Oh, it would be a pleasure. It would be my honor, Rich. I'd love that.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Beautiful. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening to the Chiro Business Mojo podcast at www.chirobusinessmojo.com.